So you want to learn Blender in under 7 minutes. Okay, when you open up Blender, you'll find a bunch of options such as what you want to use for selecting and what the spacebar is used for. You can select based on your liking if you want, or you can copy me. I like to use right click to select, and I like to use spacebar for searching stuff. Now that you're done with that, you need to know how to navigate. As long as you have a real mouse and you're not depending on your trackpad or nipple mouse, navigating in Blender is pretty easy. Just press the scroll button on your mouse and drag your mouse around to rotate. Press the middle mouse button and shift and drag around if you want to pan around the screen. And if you want to zoom in and out, use the scroll wheel. Now that you know how to navigate in Blender, you need to know how to start modeling stuff. To add in a basic mesh object, click Shift A and then add whatever you want to add. If you want to delete something, then click on X and then enter. Now there's only a couple of basic tools that you need to start modeling. You'll need to know how to extrude, inset, bevel, move, rotate, and scale. Functions like extrude, inset, and bevel only work if you are in edit mode. To enter and exit out of edit mode, you click on Tab on your keyboard. Once you are in edit mode, you'll be able to select every vertex and modify your object. On the top, you'll be able to see 3 options, so if you want, you can select edges, faces instead of vertices and keep switching between the 3. I have mentioned hotkeys alongside the name in this clip, and it would be really useful if you could use the hotkeys since it really speeds up your workflow by a ton. One extra helpful tip is that once you click the grab, rotate or scale hotkey, you can click X, Y or Z on your keyboard for each axis, and then the function will work based on the axis. I really think you should experiment with all these things before you move on. Okay, now that you know that, you might want to start off by modeling that Mustang that you've been searching for on the internet. Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. Modeling is a skill that requires patience and skill, and you can't just start modeling the most complicated objects on day one. If you're really into modeling, I highly recommend the donor tutorial and of course the Lord himself, CG Matter. Also, there's one more thing I want to mention. On your right, you should see this little icon that says Modifiers on it. Modifiers are really useful and I think you should start trying them out just to experiment with them. Worst case scenario, if anything goes wrong, you can always close Blender and restart it and everything will still be working. Now you want to start making some actual animations. Well, there's a lot of ways you can start animation, but since this is a quick tutorial, I'm going to show you 2 ways. The first way is through quick simulations. So you want some quick simulations like fluids, rigid bodies, or maybe explosions. That's much easier than you think. You click on the search button, in this case my search button is spacebar, and then you type in quick, and you should be able to see all these effects. Just select one and you're good to go. Oh, but I also promised you rigid bodies as well. So rigid bodies is basically when you want something to fall on something else. So what you want to do is select an object that you want to be falling and then select another object that is the object on which the first object should be falling on. So for example, you have a ground and a cube, and the ground will be the object that the cube is falling on. Now what you want to do is select the first object, go to physics, then click on rigid bodies. Once that is applied, make sure you set your rigid body type to active. After that, you want to go to the other object and do the same thing, except this time you want the rigid body type to be passive. And voila, you should have some sort of falling animation. Now if you want to render this stuff, skip to this part of the video. Okay, the other way to make animations is keyframes. It's hard to explain keyframes really quick, so I'll give this a try. Let's say your cube is over here on frame 1 and you want the cube to be there on frame 3. So what you do is set a keyframe on frame 1 on this position and then set another keyframe on frame 3 on that position, and voila, you have a moving cube. Okay, now that you know that, how do you make keyframes? Well, you press I on your keyboard and then you get this menu. Depending on what you want, you can select your keyframe between combinations of location, rotation, and scale of the object. You can set a keyframe right now on frame 1 and then in the timeline below switch to another frame, say frame 60, and then set another keyframe and you should have a working animation. Now you want to render this animation. To render your animation, you'll want to see the finished results first. So click on Z on your keyboard and you should see something like this. You can click on wireframe to see a wireframe view of whatever you have on your viewport. But in this case, we want to see the rendered view, which is on the top here. So click Z again and then click on rendered. Now you need to understand something. There's 2 types of render engines. One is Cycles and the other is Eevee. Eevee Render Engine renders out your image really fast by using some weird algorithms, very similar to what you would find in video games. This is the render engine that's set by default, but Cycles is a very slow render engine that renders by simply bouncing light, much like the real world. The main difference is that Cycles render engine gives us a way more realistic render than Eevee. But if time is valuable to you and you don't really care how good your animation looks in the end, you can just use Eevee. You can switch between render engines by clicking on that camera icon on the right and then switching between two render engines. Okay, now that that's out of the way, click Shift A and then click on camera. Click 0 on the number pad of your keyboard and then you should be able to look through your camera. Now click N and then go to the View tab and then click on Lock to Camera checkbox. Now when you try to navigate, you should also be moving your camera as well. So pick a spot you really like, and then when you're done, you will have to specify some output properties. Like if you want to render just an image, then you might want to render a PNG. But if you want to render a video, you might want to render through H.264. And you also need to give an address to where you want to save the file. Okay, so after you're done with all of that, click on render. And then if you want to render just one frame, click on render image. But if you want to render the whole animation, click render animation. Now that you finally learned a thing or two about Blender, I want to share a couple of things. I know that there's a lot of hotkeys and that it can be really intimidating when there's so many options that you see on your screen. But the trick to learning Blender is to simply not give up no matter what. Anyways, thanks for watching this video. There might be a lot of things that I might have missed out on. So if you think there is, feel free to leave it in the comment section. And also, if you like this video, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.